Okay. Paul, do you want to throw to Nikki?
Welcome back, and I'm talking to Ric Hayes from McCann Metro. You were just saying what makes Metro different and why people are able to take advantage of your skills.
Sure. I think what makes Metro different is the fact that we're born out of an integrated communications agency and McCann Manchester, and with that comes a certain view on how to do things, and we put the consumer at the centre of everything we do, really, and that comes from the communications background. It's part of our heritage, it's part of our DNA as a comms agency, and we really bring that to the forefront of what we do with Metro. So we understand technology, we understand creative, but it's really about kind of the consumer and understanding the consumer.
So more of a sort of creating user-friendly ways that the end customer can get involved with the particular brand.
Absolutely, yeah. We have quite a rigorous procedure that means a lot of our creative thinking actually gets thrown out and doesn't go anywhere. Ooh. Because it needs to be underpinned by insight and consumer insight.
So more customer service based even.
Yeah, to a degree. It's definitely about the experience, how people are going to experience and be engaged with the end product. And if we can't find that insight in there, then the idea doesn't go anywhere. And that's quite specific why we've set ourselves up like that. And I think we've got, with the backing of McCann Manchester, a huge pool of research, planning and strategic resource that we can tap into to drive that forward, really. And I think the second point of that heritage is the fact that we are an integrated communications agency, and Metro's got that integrated view to life, if you like. And what that allows us to do is kind of not treat the digital life of people and what you could call the real life of people as two separate entities. So we don't necessarily talk about ourselves as a digital agency in that sense. We're very much, we do focus on digital technologies, but we kind of work to a philosophy of a real world digital, I guess. And that's kind of acknowledgement of this idea that you can't separate the two, that your digital world isn't different from your real world, and the two interact all the time. And it's in fact that interaction that's quite an interesting area, and there's a lot of opportunity that can kind of live in that space as well. So they're the two kind of key differences of Metro. And I think one final part of it would be our affiliation with the McCann Group in Manchester, and the wider network means we can operate as a bespoke boutique hub, if you like, in the middle of Manchester, but at the same time we can scale very, very rapidly. So that allows us to work with some of the larger clients and some of the bigger projects that we need to handle that might scale Europe or internationally.
Mm-hmm. Integrated, that's a great word you pick up on, because I'm from London, I'm from an agency background, and integrated in London was the word. Mm-hmm. It meant that you didn't think necessarily about the platform, as you're saying, you think about the concept and the way you could just talk to people across various medias. Not the same here in Manchester. You guys, when you talk to your clients, are they wary of it? Because it could sound like jargon, couldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And we're quite fortunate in the McCann Group that the Manchester operation is fully integrated, so we have all the services under one roof, if you like.
So what sort of services would those be?
So we have the media outfit, so Universal McCann, that's part of our family. We've got Metro as a surrogate part of the family. We've got the PR teams, we've got planning, creative, and then all the account groups, all kind of working from one campus location. So we can have a very real conversation with our clients about integration because we actually live and breathe it, and sometimes that can be a more difficult conversation when you don't, and you are kind of split as a business in your own right. And that said, though, not necessarily every client wants to buy integration outright in one kind of piece. But even if you don't, you can't help but benefit from some of the synergies of the fact that our guys, our search engine optimization guys work right next door to our social media guys. So you just get kind of the benefits of that cross-fertilization of ideas, really, that live and breathe throughout the unit. So.
And you're saying that digital is just part of that, but I know a lot of our guests have been talking about the challenges of digital and the curse of digital, which is something that a lot of people brought up. What do you see are the biggest challenges for agencies such as you?
Yeah, I think there are challenges with getting to grips with digital. I think there's probably two key challenges that you could you could drive to the curse of digital, if you like, and they're related, as I see it anyway. And the first one, I think, is the complexity of understanding what we mean by digital. So two people talk about digital could actually talk about two completely separate things. So you look under the hood of digital and you've got this proliferation of platforms, so all sorts of different kind of websites and apps, and the technology that drives them probably belongs more in an IT company than maybe a marketing company. Added to that, you've got a huge array of content to try and get to grips with. What should we be producing? Should it be video? Should it be text? What mix of that should we be doing? And then you've got all sorts of different channels. So when we talk about digital, are you talking websites? Are we talking search engines? Are we talking social media, social networks, etc.? So there's just this complex ecosystem when you actually look at it. And if that's not difficult, then, or if that's not hard enough, then we'll kind of change the rules every 2 months and we'll bring in a new player. This disrupts that whole ecosystem and makes us think again. So, okay, so what does that mean? Yes, it's complicated. What it can lead to is businesses and brands and maybe agencies to some degree saying, actually it's difficult, this whole big piece in understanding all of this, but what I can understand is an iPhone application. So your thinking can very quickly jump to execution rather than being strategic. And that can be one of the curses of digital, is you end up with a brand that is made up of lots of little executions that don't necessarily make sense and move your business on in the digital world. So that's the first challenge. And the second one that's related to that is, in response to the complexity and the pace and dealing with all of that, businesses and agencies have tended to ring fence digital. So they've kind of made it a silo. And that kind of, I can see why that makes sense in some respects, to say, well, let's get a load of people to look at it 24/7 all the time. They'll become the experts, they'll become the professionals, they can keep up with it because that's what they do. And so you get rise of the specialist, and there's very much a part of and a reason for specialists, and I get them
creeping towards the IT geek element, isn't it, almost?
Can be, yes, absolutely. But it can also, the rise of the digital agency, for example, is born of the fact that of the complexity in this new kind of way of doing things. A rise of the social media agency or the search engine marketing agency. All these specialisms, and what can happen is they can know their channel or their area extremely well, but in doing that can kind of maybe take the eye off the ball of the consumer, if you like, which needs to be the anchor of this whole piece. So you get to know what you're doing, but you lose sight of the wider context.
They become blinkered, don't they?
Can do.
They're so focused on their area, they forget how else that consumer will touch the brand and all the different ways that us as consumers come to a brand.
You can run the risk of missing the bigger picture. Now, I'm not for a minute suggesting that that specialist units do that all the time. They have a very, very key part to play in that bigger picture. But if I'm a brand owner, for example, I need to know how my brand's going to play out across all touch points, and I need to know, as difficult as it might be, how I'm going to navigate this landscape of proliferation of content and etc. as I talked about before. So,
well, you're just picking up there on that. It's okay for agencies to understand that complex web, but it's getting it across to the brand owners and even the SMEs, how they can be more comfortable with the various concepts, isn't it, and what the challenges are for them at their level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think depending on size of brand and relationships and partnerships that a brand has in place, I think that's where the value of an agency comes in today's market. Is being able to kind of offer that stewardship across, kind of that whole network of complexity, if you like, and help them manage their brand across that. I think SMEs, in some respects, I wouldn't say they have an easier job, but they can often move quicker and certainly deal with the flexibility and the requirement to be agile in the digital space. So I think they can stand quite good stead, and often you see over and over again, kind of they beat the bigger players because they can do that.
Well, we've just had a related question in from Jenny, a freelancer, and she'd like to know, have you got any advice, could you give her as a freelancer, working with a client who doesn't really quite get digital? She's thinking of some social media policies.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing is to appreciate what they're up against in terms of if they don't quite get digital, what might that be? And secondly, I would I drag away from the execution. So, for example, you talk about social media there. Well, you know, blogs aren't important. Self-publishing is important. You know, and the same kind of podcasts, etc. So it's moving. It's moving out of execution and back to the need, and that allows you to have a much broader discussion and part education of doing that. So you could say the same, you know, RSS necessarily. That technology isn't important, but the idea of customizing my information and providing filters, that's what's important. And I think when you communicate at that level, all marketers, brand owners can start to get it. Then it's your job as the expert to translate that into an execution.
I know when we create our blogs and newsletters and so on, it's about having a conversation about what we do as video specialists with our clients and sort of hoping that they'll give us feedback, because it's got to be a conversation. You know, yes, at the end of the day, we're all businesses, we're all after a bit of profit, but it's just nice to have things like this, a two-way conversation with people to get some really great feedback on what we're doing.
Yeah, and conversation, yeah, the key to business and driving that profit, I guess, if you're going to look there, yeah.
Right, well, moving on, we talked about digital in its wider integrated look and its challenges. One of the challenges I'd like to pick up on is something we talked to Sean at Manchester Digital last week, and that is our wonderful broadband, which most viewers would already be picking up on today. It's causing a few problems again. For all of the social media and clever video and streaming and whatnot out there, your apps and so on, if you're not in the right mobile area to get a signal, if you're not getting broadband, what is the point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think broadband's absolutely key. You know, we saw broadband being responsible for the rise of social media and all these this new kind of proliferation of content that I was talking about before, the way we can kind of watch, you know, TV online, etc., etc. It's broadband that fuels that. So yeah, I guess I can only really, you know, back the call that other people are getting involved with, which is about pushing our digital infrastructure further. We can be, you know, best in breed in terms of creative services and digital services, but we need the infrastructure, I guess, to support that and justify it.
Interesting then that we've got a reminder from our friend Les Selby at Wired City. Ray! He's reminded us that Vision and Media have launched a fund for IPTV, which is kind of coming into the fore from our perspective, but I'm guessing there's lots of risks and opportunities around that, and I know it's one of your passions. What do you think are those risks and opportunities?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm kind of seeing more opportunity than risk. If I'm honest, I think you know, the risk would probably be the same risk with any emerging platform, is we don't 100% know what take-up's going to be, how it's going to work. The big risk, I guess, being broadband. You know, it relies very heavily to a decent broadband connection. So we may see the UK lacking a little bit in take-up, but I think the opportunities are huge. One of the issues with IPTV is just the understanding of the terminology in terms of, you know, internet protocol television. We actually already kind of have that in some circumstances. We have kind of the closed systems, so we've got the Virgins of the world, the BT Visions, and we've got the open systems, so we have the iPlayer, and we have kind of hosted services like YouTube and Hulu and stuff. So there is a, you know, kind of a TV network out there, if you like. What the IPTV, I think, that the Vision and Media is concentrating on, and Les refers to, is about the amalgamation of all of that content into one place, your set-top box. And then, interestingly, and where I think a lot of the opportunity comes from, is the providing of services and related services to that content. So, for example, you know, applications, music, access to the internet, that all kind of surrounds this television content, if you realize, if you get that. So you can end up in this space where you have a very immersive, interactive TV medium that can be very, very powerful for consumers and marketers.
I was going to say, is it something that brands should be really getting much more interested in?
I think so, yeah. I think it's something we should definitely stick on the watch list, and maybe even move forward and start kind of, you know, a few experiments when it starts kicking off next year. I think, you know, if you can imagine, you can get to the stage whereby we could be watching a music event with a Twitter feed running next to it, commenting on what we're watching, or we could be looking at a sports event and jump out and into an application that gives us stats on the game we're watching, for example. It becomes an incredibly dynamic space, and I think the opportunities to consumers is is quite obvious. But I think for marketers, there's a couple of ways of coming at this space. One is if you're a TV advertiser, you can probably start to drill down into new demographic segments based on the type of content people are consuming and looking at that you won't be privy to at the moment. So you can get incredibly well-targeted campaigns. And interestingly for me, if you're kind of more of a digital marketer at the moment, you can move into kind of a new mindset. And going back to this idea of putting the consumer at the heart of it, this is the area I find quite interesting, because at the moment, if you look at kind of digital marketing, a lot of it is done, still via PC, via mobile, via laptops, and consumers are said to be in what you'd call kind of marketing speak, I suppose, of a lean forward, information seeking mindset. So they've got a job to do, and at the moment, in kind of web design, you're about helping them do that job as effectively and as quickly as possible, I suppose. When you move into the realms of IPTV and people are on the sofas, you're moving into more of the TV ad space, which is you're in someone's leisure time now. And we're starting to see it a bit with the iPad, that moves from kind of lean forward, I've got a job to do, into a leisure device where I will kind of, be a bit more emotive. So maybe digital marketers now need to start thinking broader about kind of the creative that they're using, the messaging that they're using, because they're going to start engaging people in a different zone than
it's not
than
selling at, it's conversating with, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, and it's going to move more into that space as they start going into leisure and entertainment. So interesting times.
Well, continuing the IPTV, Eric Edwardson says, what are your top points for quality IPTV?
Well, in terms of quality, I'm presuming to talk about quality of service in that sense.
I'd guess service, maybe technical, maybe the creative, because it's all got to work together, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's the integration of those things. I think it's going to be a watch and wait in terms of the design principles that go with IPTV, but I would certainly start looking at some of my existing platforms. As we did with mobile devices, we kind of repurposed what we had in terms of websites and made them accessible on that platform. I think at the moment we need to watch this new platform and see how do we repurpose some of the content we've got for this new area.
Yeah, and that's something that we get asked a lot of all the time. So we're creating video that is content rich, and we're talking to internet owners and businesses about creating lots and lots of content for various different ways of talking to their customers, and they're just even local TV are hungry for content, and it's just generating enough so that there's enough difference, there's enough good quality, and there's enough material that will be engaging and do the job. Absolutely, and content that again is kind of fueled by some type of insight. Why are we making video, for example? Well, maybe we're making video because text is difficult to read from a screen, or and then if we are making video, where are we hosting that? Where are we syndicating that? Yeah. So there's all different ways of deciding what mix of content to create, and then what balance of channels and platforms to syndicate that content on, or do we need to build a new platform for our content? It's there's a lot of deliberation that needs to go over these things. It's almost sort of home brand TV, some of the conversations we have. Yeah, well, interestingly, I think that's a fair point with IPTV as well. I think experimenting with the TV set-top box, probably one of the most, arguably one of the most important screens in people's lives, is going to become a lot less expensive, so we can experiment in that space. And another question in from Sue. She's interested in knowing, is IPTV then a real alternative to the hyperlocal TV? And this has been something on How Do recently that's been a constant message. And I'm guessing she's comparing it to Channel M style. Well, I do think that the ability to have a very personalised TV viewing experience is something that's going to be a really real alternative to hyperlocal TV. Not that my personalised TV viewing experience won't be based on kind of local content, but we're almost getting down to the level of one-on-one viewing habits. So almost no two people will have the shared viewing or content that they're viewing, I guess. So arguably in that case it could be. But I mean, it's far too early to kind of make presumptions, So that's one coming idea. But I'm just wondering if there are any other new and emerging routes to conversations that you guys are seeing in your magical crystal ball? So what's
Sure.
new in the new year, sort of thing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, really. When we talk about predictions and things, a lot of the time we jump into, it'll be this channel, it'll be this execution, and I guess in the spirit of this conversation that we've been having, I think some of the trends we're going to start seeing now are more about new business models and new ways of working. So I think things around increased collaboration, so I talk about all these specialists before. Again, one of the key parts of Metro is about kind of, use the buzzword of integration again, but integrating into our surroundings. One of the reasons we're in the city centre is so we can tap into that infrastructure of specialists, etc. So I think we're going to see more collaboration. I think we're going to hear the buzzword of transmedia over and over. That's going to be my pitch for most repeated buzzword.
Transmedia, that's a new one on us. Go on, you're going to have to explain.
No, essentially a buzzword referring to taking one idea or one concept and representing it across all different content types. So you already see it with kind of children's TV, for example. You might have Bob the Builder, the TV show, but then you also get Bob the Builder, the game, the board game, the book, the poster. So it's one kind of idea, one thing, one product represented across a whole load of different media types. And I think when we start talking about convergence, that becomes a pretty big issue. So yeah, I guess more ways of working would be
Interesting.
Would be my predictions.
And again, you're going to need content that is malleable for all those different routes.
100%, yeah. It's about flexibility, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, I do think it's time to pick up on something that's obviously hit the press today, and that's our friend Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know what you guys think of this non-email email that they want to launch.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this. And to be honest, I haven't had a play with it myself yet, but I kind of saw Facebook, as the email killer, I guess.
Giant killers.
Yeah, in that sense. But I think essentially that this is a play for a younger demographic for Facebook. I think what you'll probably find is the younger users on Facebook kind of conduct so much of their lives on Facebook, but then they'll jump out of that to do emails. I think from some of the research we've been doing, we find that that the youth, I guess, the youth of today, they find email a little bit stagnant. Okay. And they find it a little bit stagnant, a little bit slow, a little bit formal. So in Facebook's play to integrate that, they're kind of catching that whole demographic, really, in terms of just, again, integrating into everything they do now. So they've kind of have a whole catchment of it.
And certainly this streaming software that we use has this both a Twitter and a Facebook interface, and it's also got a forum interface. So like you were saying with IPTV, you've got video playing and you can carry on a conversation at the same time with other forum users and other Twitters and Facebookers, and there's no visible line between this media and that media. It's just this sort of blurring of the technologies. Is that the sort of transmedia coming through there?
Yeah, I think you could definitely put that argument forward. I mean, I guess where it becomes interesting, where technology becomes interesting, is when it actually gets invisible and you stop noticing that you're using technology.
Yeah.
And I know it's been talked about quite a lot, that, but a bit like, you don't notice when you're writing with a pen, you just notice what you're producing.
Yeah.
Technology gets very interesting when it's like that. And again, a bit about IPTV, we don't necessarily acknowledge it's the internet that's driving this stuff. And when you're on Facebook, you're not necessarily saying I'm on the internet, you're on Facebook, and now your whole kind of world is encapsulated in that. And that stuff starts to become really interesting.
Be interesting to see how agencies of your size are able to help your brands and your clients take advantage of that, and then how smaller agencies can help our smaller clients really get involved. I think there's a few interesting things coming next year, hopefully, along with some broadband.
No, absolutely.
So we've spoken to loads of the digital companies that have come in conversation with, and some of the creative companies. And we know what their way of dealing with digital is. What 3 things do you think right now give the best return on investment? If you had just had to say blah, blah, and blah.
Yeah, I think understanding your consumer is the biggest thing, and I know it's that's the key thing in marketing, but doing that through a mix of data and analytics and what we would say is kind of research or real world research methodologies to get a full 360 view of your consumer. That's probably the biggest thing that you could do. I think secondly is personalising experiences as much as you can online or within digital, whatever digital platform you're using, making things relevant to people. So relevance would be the second one, and being entertaining, I guess, as well. I know when I talk about being in a lean forward view, you need to be quick, you need to be effective, but at the same time, I think entertainment's got a lot to play in it as well.
And interestingly, I would say those three things are prevalent no matter whether it's digital, normal marketing communications and other brand communications. For every time you talk to your client or your customers, you have to be relevant, you have to be entertaining, and you have to know who it is you're talking to. Otherwise, any response from them is going to be pointless.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're not part of their lives or adding any value to it, then you won't get any return, regardless what you're trying to say.
Well, Rick, that has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in to see us today.
It's been great.
Hope you enjoyed that. I've got a couple of dates for your diary. The next In Conversation is with Dave Adams from Savvy Partnership. That's on the 30th of November. Then we have our special lunchtime debate with MPA here on the 7th of December. And then Rob Brown, MD of Standing Forth, on the 14th of December. Hope you enjoyed In Conversation with today. Bye-bye.